Okay. Good morning, Maggie Ball. Thanks for joining us here at Yellow Shelf.
Good morning, Joanna. So happy to be here today.
Excellent. Maggie, I just wanted to give a shout out to your podcast, Compulsive Reader Talks. But before we chat, I just want to acknowledge, Maggie, you were kind enough to speak to me more than a year ago about Yellow Shelf, when Yellow Shelf was just an idea, when I was having discovery conversations about what Yellow Shelf was about. So you were incredibly generous with your time to talk to me. You're an experienced podcaster and an experienced author promoter. So thank you.
It's a pleasure and congratulations on coming so far in the space of a year. It's amazing. And, as an author, I think it's great. It's great that there are resources like yours out there.
Yeah. And look, definitely a full circle moment here. So I'm feeling really grateful, Maggie. But today we're going to talk about your podcast, which, as I said, Compulsive Reader Talks podcast. You have more than 180 episodes in the vault. I would encourage people to just go through and have a look at all the incredible authors. But what do we need to know about your podcast, Maggie?
So firstly, I set it up many years ago as an adjunct to Compulsive Reader. So I was writing reviews, but, I love chatting with authors. So it's, really for me, it's just a way of indulging myself. As you said, we've got loads of interviews. We've been around since 2007. And before that, I was transcribing. So in 2007, I realized it was much easier to actually be able to record rather than trying to write while somebody's talking. So we started in 2007. And when we had the first recorded podcast, so we've got tons, as you said, of content. It's really amazing. I don't do a huge amount of promotion, but there's a treasure trove there. So, names like Ben Okri, who is our featured image. That was a great interview that took place at the Sydney Writers Festival. We've got Jane Smiley, Omar Musa, Jessica Al, Vivian Gornick, Ali Cobby Eckerman, John Banville, Lily Brett. The list goes on. Just throw out a few names there. So it's there's a lot of great stuff there, and some of the authors, it's kind of fun, were less famous than they are now, so it's really fun to also go back in time and say, okay, Craig Silvey before Jasper Jones became a film, for example.
Wow, that's incredible. What a journey. And Maggie, tell us about what inspired you. Are you an author? Like, you tell us about what we need to know. I know you've been in the corporate world, so tell us a bit about Maggie.
Sure. So many years ago, decades ago, I was doing a postgraduate degree in English Lit at Oxford University, heading towards what I expected would be a career writing and talking about books, which, of course, I love. When I came to a rather painful realization that the academic life was not what I was expecting, it wouldn't suit me. That's a whole novel in itself, I think. Yeah. But I ended up pivoting into business, which I was effectively working in a day job anyway at the time for a company. And it was paying a lot better than I knew writing would ever pay. So, but I've loved reading and writing and talking about books since I was a child. And of course, I was reading more than ever once I left academia. But I wanted more. I felt like there was an ecosystem, a community of book lovers, and I wanted to join. I wanted to participate in that ecosystem. So, it's a joy for me, and joy is where I begin. I always feel like when I'm delving into a book that I love, there is a joy there. The kind of joy that I experienced, as a child. I think maybe many of us do, when my mom was reading to me. So just that moment of kind of being in another world, but also being absolutely safe in that world. I could go anywhere, I could adventure. That's joy is at the heart. And that's really all it is. So 27 years ago, when I began interviewing authors in conjunction with Compulsive Reader Reviews, there were very few podcasts. It was really early days for websites and blogs. So it was a bit novel to be doing these kinds of things. But I wrote an early book review and I loved it. I did an interview with Tom Keneally, who I met recently a couple of years ago at again, and I told him, you were my first, and anyone who knows Tom will know how genial and warm and garrulous he is. We scheduled 30 minutes. I had a young child at the time, a baby, and who's now 27. And I had a friend round to mind the baby That's my eldest child. And an hour and a half later, Tom and I were still talking.
Wow.
I virtually felt at the end of that, I want to invite this guy to dinner because there's still so much more to say and to talk about. Now, not every guest was as charming and warm as Tom, but he got me hooked. And as I say, I had the pleasure of telling him that a few years ago. You were my first and you got me hooked. So yeah, that's it. I knew this is some place that I loved and I wanted to keep it going.
Yeah. And I mean, your episodes are longer than Yellow Shelves. You know, you deep dive certainly a lot more into authors. And as we both acknowledge, sometimes you feel like you want to talk more. So it's a really inspiring place. And you can tell by the way you talk, Maggie, that it's definitely your joy space, and you articulate it so well. So yeah, I'd recommend people check you out. Maggie, what's the best way to connect with you? I'll put this in the show notes to make it easy, but how do we like connect with your podcast or connect with your blog, newsletter? What's the best way?
The easiest way, and it's really very easy, probably the same as with Yellow Shelf, is just subscribe. And you can subscribe on any podcatcher. So any way that you normally listen to your podcasts, if you listen to your podcasts, just subscribe and then they just come in automatically. So I use Apple Podcasts. And when I'm driving to and from work is when I tend to listen to my subscribed podcasts. I don't have to think about it. I always get the new shows. And by the way, John Kinsella is the latest show, and he's great. So that's just a couple of days ago. So that's in there now. So there are lots of ways to do it. Do whatever is easiest to you. If you use Apple, use Apple. If you use some other way of subscribing to podcasts, that's easy. But people can also go to Compulsive Reader. So that's just compulsivereader.com, Compulsive Reader, all one word.com. And they can sign up for the free monthly newsletter. We always promote the podcast in the newsletter. There are book giveaways every month. I always have at least one, sometimes two, sometimes even three. I love giving away books, and a roundup of global book news and all the big reviews. All the new reviews are in there. So we used to have 10 a month, but I'm trying to keep from falling too far behind on my big queue. So now we're up to about 12 to 15 a month of new reviews. I don't write them all. I'm not that prolific.
Yeah.
I usually do one or two, but I get a lot of great reviewers writing in reviews as well. So that's all in the newsletter. And I personally will generally interview people whose work I've reviewed, because I like to, it's just more of the same. I like to go deeper into the book and some of the themes that I've looked at. So so that's just go there. And then also my own website, which is magdalenaball.com. Which features my writing work as well as Compulsive Reader, all sorts of links and contact details for people who want to get in touch.
Fabulous. And Maggie, it's interesting because we complement each other with our work, because I've recently interviewed John Kinsella, a much shorter interview than yours, but brilliant. Yours definitely deep dive and went into further about such an incredible author. Yeah.
We really only focus, I mean, he's so prolific, it's kind of almost unbearable as a writer. I'm like, oh, I thought I was prolific, but God, no.
Yeah.
but we just only really mostly talked about Beam of Light, which is his book of short stories. We didn't go into his massive, like, I don't know how many
catalog,
70 or something. We didn't go into everything, and he's even got 2 out now, and more coming. So it's amazing. But yeah, look, at the end of 30 minutes, I was like, we have scratched the surface.
Well, Maggie, thank you so much for joining us today. I'd recommend everyone take a listen. Much more longer content than Yellow Shelf offers. And you're a leader in what you do in this space, because you've paved the way for podcasts like me to, provide shorter content. So thank you so much.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. And thank you so much for all you do.
Cheers, Maggie.